Hello and welcome to the HAJIME Judo podcast. I am your host, Hannah Martin, recently retired USA Judoka on the USA National Team, and I'd like to welcome Dr. Chris Round. He is a fourth degree black belt. He holds a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he is an international level coach. And he's also a scholar, so he's holding a PhD in environmental science and policy. Also, fun fact, Chris was a training partner for members of 4 Olympic teams and has provided professional scouting services to members of the 2016 Olympic Games, 2019 World Championships, and also for athletes on the Pan American team. So, and he's now serving as a coach. There's a lot of things about you. You're now a coach at High Noon Judo. You are, bringing your experience of all your judo experience, the next generation of athletes, and the theme of this interview podcast is about also how you dealt with being autistic and being in sports and everything like this. So, anyways, I'll let you talk.
Yeah,
So, Chris, welcome to Hajime. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Great, Hannah, it's great to see you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk with you. This is going to be so
Mhm.
much fun. So,
Yeah.
yeah, let's, start from the beginning.
Mhm.
Take me back to how you first got involved in judo and what drew you to the sport exactly.
So I was drawn to the sport. My father did judo. Actually, my father did judo with the same coach. My father did judo with Jim Pedro Sr. And
Okay.
then it was funny. My parents were kind of looking at things for my brother and I to do. My dad always kind of intended for us to do judo.
Hmm.
And one day we walk in and Jimmy's right there, and so was his dad, and we just started up judo. And I was really into it just at the gate. I started kind of I was about around 12 when I started judo. So a little late, but I really, really enjoyed it out the gate. It was like the thing that I was just into immediately from day one.
So
Uh,
your dad did judo and then he
yeah,
introduced you to judo. Awesome.
yeah. It's really one of the really cool things about judo is like you I feel like when you jump into judo, there's all of these like ongoing storylines, and it's kind of fun that, as I got older, I run into people my dad told me about, when I was a
Mhm.
kid. So
Yeah.
that's kind of a fun thing.
Yeah, judo, it's international. It's a big sport, but also it's a small sport. It's a small world. Everyone like it's a very, it's a circle. Everyone knows each other and there's
Mm-hmm.
some ways we're all connected. So, and it's so
Yeah.
cool 'cause it's through the sport of judo. Um,
Yeah.
so was there like a particular moment or a particular coach early on that made you like, fall in love with the sport?
Well, I really enjoy, so I benefit from, like, I started with really good coaches in the beginning, and one of the reasons I had really enjoyed judo out the gate was, growing up autistic, I was kind of part of a generation of folks who we were still learning how to work with autistic students. So a
Mhm.
lot of the conversation was often about what could I not do? And, as a kid, you eventually pick up on that. And one of the things I really liked about, working with Jimmy and, Alex Otiano was there at the time. And I think my first lesson was a guy named Mike Procopio. Good guy. The conversation a little bit, well, what can he do? It was very positive. It was very empowering. And I think that was what like made me very interested. Like, I felt empowered when I came to judo.
Mhm.
So, and that was, where I was at that point in growing up, that really mattered. So I felt like when I came to judo, I felt like the people who were teaching me really wanted me to succeed. I felt supported. I
Mhm.
enjoyed the people I was meeting. Socially, for folks on the autism spectrum, social elements can be very difficult. And the nice thing about judo and grappling in general is that you can kind of form bonds and friendships with people without a lot of conversation.
This is
Um,
true. Hmm.
and it's funny because I remember flashing back to those moments years later when I'm training internationally. I'm like, you not can't necessarily speak with the other person, but you develop these friendships with training partners and stuff like that because you get to know each other just through physical movement.
Yeah.
And I think so. I think the camaraderie, and I enjoyed fighting. I enjoyed training. Like, I found that stuff all fun to begin with.
Yeah.
So then you like put all that together, that feeling of empowerment, that and also just it was cool to be like, oh, that person's going to the Olympics, that person's going to the Olympics. It was cool to like grow up around that.
Mhm.
You know, I remember, I remember being 15 and Ronda Rousey was my training partner because she and I were the only people near the same age and size.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
so that was really fun.
Yeah. So that's like really interesting. So you really felt, like seen when when you went to judo. So judo was
Yes,
a special place from the get-go, like when you were very young. So um
right out the gate. And it's something
yeah.
where like I didn't necessarily because I didn't because of gross motor issues. So how autism presented in me from a
Yeah.
physical standpoint, I was in occupational therapy for most of my childhood. Actually, within about a year, and I want to be very clear when I tell this story, if there are any parents of autistic children listening to this, um, everyone with autism is kind of in a unique situation. So I don't want to like misrepresent my
Hmm.
situation and how that might impact others. But I was in occupational therapy for most of my childhood. Within about a year of doing judo, actually, my occupational therapist said, you're actually okay now
Oh
on
wow.
this front.
Wow.
Yeah. So I continued occupational therapy for about 2 more years after I started judo.
Hmm.
But the therapist, I didn't continue in high school because basically the therapist said, well, this was kind of like occupational therapy on steroids. So by the way, to be very clear, parents, if your kids are in occupational therapy, keep them in occupational therapy. But in my case, it made a huge difference. And I by the time after a year or two of judo, I was back up to the level of where peers were. And then, by the time I was competing, by the time, you and I were running to each other, at that point I had moved into the space you would expect of someone to be an athlete.
Yeah.
But it did have some, one of the interesting things that impacted and really impacts me now as a coach that it was a hindrance back then, but a benefit now was because I couldn't do something like a, cartwheel uchimata. I was not athletic enough to do that kind of thing. I
Can I
had
just
to really
say I couldn't do that either, actually. In
Go
the in
team.
the like if you ask like my one of my first coaches, like I could not do a cartwheel. Like I did some crazy cart I don't know. Like so 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 don't worry. Like
Okay.
wasn't wasn't good at gymnastics, that's for sure. So
Uh, uh, um, yeah, I think my parents had me try gymnastics briefly, and it lasted about a day. But where it impacted was because I got lucky in another area. Because the Pedros are known for teaching gripping and known for teaching a very positional game.
mhm.
It allowed me to kind of explore judo for more cerebrally to think about what kind of judo could I play with what skill set I physically had. In fact, Jimmy was very big on that when I got older and was on team force and we talked about what to work on, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And it was a lot of times it was a discussion of, okay, I'm not going to do anything big, spectacular, and dynamic, but if I play very smart, if I understand how to fight a match, I understand, where things fit and think of things in terms of systems.
Yeah.
Um, it made a big difference. And also that's one of the reasons I gelled. I also worked a lot with Dr. Roddy Ferguson. He was a systems guy too. Well, and that resulted in a literacy in the sport that really helped me when I got into scouting and really helped me as I became a coach.
That's really, yeah, that is definitely how, like, because every, club has their own way of approaching judo, but for sure,
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy Pedro's club, I remember it was very, because I would go there a lot and train
Mm-hmm.
there.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of gripping, lots of different ways of thinking how to get into a position. So I can understand like why you were so interested in like this part of judo. There's so many different areas of judo. So this is a different perspective of it, I think, of judo. Not just like I just want to throw someone. I just want to like, get the ippon. No, there is a way to get there. You have to get in the position. You have to grip, and I remember going to camps and learning so many different ways to, yeah, do one technique by gripping differently or moving differently. So this is just judo, really, it's just
Yeah, yeah,
like you're always like learning something, but this was very interesting for me too when I would go there. So I didn't
yeah.
grow up there, obviously, but we went there so many training camps, right? When we were younger,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
many, many training camps there.
For context, you were on the U23 team, right?
Yes. I believe.
Yes.
I mean, it seems like so long ago. Let's not age us, but yes,
Yes.
yes. So I remember
Yeah.
going there for U-23 like training camps. We would always go there to
Hmm.
prepare for, I don't even know, or help prepare for some competitions or help the Olympic athletes that were training the Olympics
Hmm.
time because we were not going to the Olympics, but there was like
Hmm.
Rhonda was there. Jimmy Pedro might have still been competing then, but I don't think when we were under then I think he
Yeah, that was the quad after.
okay, okay.
Yeah,
Well, did,
so
yeah.
I will say, like, I think there was another thing like really wrote me in was like, being there and watching Jimmy get ready to take bronze in Athens. That was really cool. But yeah, there's a running joke in the autism community that everyone's just really obsessed with train schedules. And what that is people like to think of things in organized patterns, and humans like to do it anyways. But there's a real thing with a lot of folks who are autistic. So for me, learning and understanding all of the patterns in judo and how things were organized, that became my hyper focus. That became one of the things I was super super interested in,
Mhm.
and particularly because I knew I couldn't walk out and just put someone away, I became very interested in how do you create alternative pathways to winning and
Mhm.
stuff like that.
Mhm. So my next question is, since we're like on this topic still, and
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned parents already, like what advice would you give to, parents who have autistic children and, considering judo or considering a sport? Yeah, what kind of advice would you like to give them?
I think the first thing is don't come in with expectations.
Hmm.
Don't come with low expectations. Don't come in with high expectations. Let them explore and enjoy and have fun and start with fun. Um, and then because if you start with fun, then if something's they want to keep doing it. So start with that. I think that's true with kids in general. But nonetheless, the next thing is if they start to get more into it, look at what like if they especially if they start to move in a direction where they want to do with elite athletics, make sure that the coach, make sure there's a supportive relationship with the coach, make sure there's an understanding that you know not everyone's going to fit into a box. A lot of folks, when we talk about folks who are autistic, we're talking about people who are neuroatypical. They're not neurotypical. They're not fitting in a normal box there.
Hmm.
And their judo is often not going to either.
Hmm.
So, and how they interact with sport may not either. So, looking for a coach that has a background that is empathetic and is willing to spend the time to work on them individually, that makes a big difference. But I guess the biggest thing is don't let them come in and focus on the fun and then worry about expectations later. And
Yeah.
my father was great with that. My dad, so did my mom. They were fantastic on that front where they were just like, okay, well, let's see what they become out of this. And that was something they did a good job with my brother and I.
And did they come in, to the dojo and first mention, um, did they tell the coach that, oh, my son is autistic? Did they mention this to the coach or they just let you come in and go
So
for it?
Jimmy loves to tell this story. I my first practice ran into a wall because I didn't have enough coordination to turn while running and put a hole in the wall.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah, like yeah, there was a little hole in the drywall, and of course I'm upset because I'm nervous and all of that.
Yeah, yeah.
And Jimmy then goes over and looks at my inch, looks at my feet in form, and goes, "Oh, Chris is autistic and has issues with coordination." He goes, "Oh, I probably should have known that. I probably should have read that first."
Oh, okay,
So
so it was on like a form. They
it
put
was
it on.
on a
Oh,
form.
okay.
But yeah, I mean, but his immediate thing to his credit after, he briefly was like, "What the hell are you doing? Why are you running into walls?" It was especially when it was clear, like, hey, I was one of the kids that's gonna be really into this. It was, coming back to the empowerment thing. It was all right, well, what can he do? What can we work with him on?
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing I'll note to coaches and teachers. It's like when you have someone coming in with any kind of disability or any kind of hindrance, they spend their day being told what they can't do
Hmm.
or seeing what they can't do. You know, what you can do to help them move further in life is work on find out what can they do and help them do it. And that's good advice for coaching in general, but like it's really, really important when you're dealing with any member of the disabled community.
Yeah, I love that actually. I love hearing that. I actually like kind of need that advice just in my life. Like daily
Mhm.
life, like what can you do? That's great advice. Like I love that.
Yeah.
So you already mentioned, but we'll talk about it. You've
Mhm.
trained alongside, Olympic athletes like Kayla Harrison, Jimmy, Pedro.
Mhm.
So yeah, tell me what were some of your favorite moments as a competitor and a training partner for these the great athletes of USA Judo.
Well, I think I'll talk about a couple. I think it's really cool when Jimmy was competing, it was really cool to be like, oh, here's my hero, and they're getting ready for something. And
Yeah,
of course, I think everyone has some hero worship of their sensei, and
yeah, yeah.
it was fun to watch him. I think, I remember, I have very strong memories of watching Rhonda fight through Beijing because Rhonda and I met when I was like 14 or 15.
Mhm.
She got ready for Athens at Jimmy's and then got ready for Beijing, came back and got ready for Beijing. And that was someone who I thought of as a peer, because we were close in age, and she used to trade Pokemon with my little brother. And the you know that I remember really like, okay, here's a friend who can do it. And this is actually kind of the cool thing about being about judo and being in that space is you see people do these things,
Yeah.
and it gives you the belief that you can too. It gives you the belief that you can do that. And that the penultimate moment for that was, I remember when Kayla won, and I got to Kayla was in London, and I got to go and watch, and I painted my face in the American flag and threw on my gi. And actually, I remember when she won, myself and like Ed Liddy and I think Chris Skelly was there. We ran past security, and I give her this big hug, and she's in a white gi. I pull away, and my all of the paint that was on my
Oh,
face goes onto her gi. So I mean, moments like that are, those are really cool. Those are kind of once in a lifetime things. And but the flip side was you also know that these people are human because they're your friends and you spend time with them. And um you know the you meet very interesting people in judo. And the nice thing about it is, you meet interesting people anywhere, but the nice thing about it is it was an opportunity for me to have kind of an international perspective. I got to meet people from different teams. I got to travel over the world. Um, and then in turn, what that helped me with was off the mat, it provided an interesting story, helped me get through doors I wouldn't have otherwise gotten. I
mhm.
remember I remember talking about some of the stuff in internship interviews when I was in graduate school. Like it was, it makes a big difference.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your competition career. You did compete. I remember you competing and training
Mhm.
for different things. So
Yeah.
talk to me a little bit about your judo career.
Sure. So I was a solid junior player, and then I did well nationally within the US. So I I first few years of doing judo, I was really kind of getting up to speed. And then I was kind of one of those people who was like, it's a hard match to run into. Not I wasn't necessarily beating, someone like a Bobby Lee, but I was annoying, which is the starting point. You start by becoming a hard match. And you know, so I won junior nationals. I was like the number two junior when I finished in U20. Back then it was U20, and just to age myself, but
Yeah, I remember this because
yeah.
I also competed in this time period as well. So
um yeah. And then I sat around somewhere between like 4 and 8 in the US during like the London quad. So I competed. I tried to make the London Olympic team. The difference between Travis and I was the difference of a hammer and a nail. But I got to train a lot with folks like Travis and all of them. I spent time in Japan, I spent time in Europe. The trip to Japan in particular, the when I went the first time was like a really important thing for my growth as a human being. I actually think that's one of a lot of the lessons I learned in terms of and the way I matured was a result of going through that process and going through that competition process. So um, I then dropped out of the scene, so to speak, for a few years to do my master's, and then I came back for fits and spurts after I was doing my PhD when I moved to DC. But my primary career was through the London Quad, um, and then I would come back, and I also did a lot of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. As mentioned, I have a black belt under Dr. Roddy Ferguson there.
Hmm.
So one of the interesting things about that and how it impacts my coaching today is, I think we get to a point as, when you're a seasoned competitor in judo, you forget about all the issues you ran into when you were a beginner. You
Hmm.
forget about what to do about stiff arm. You forget about what to do about when someone's just bent over and not doing anything.
Hmm.
And, Shido's not coming. So the one of the things I think was useful for me going back and competing in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was that I had to run into that. And I was also working in a rule set that wasn't going to do anything to change the behavior.
Hmm.
So that really influenced and impact. I've spent time coaching elite players in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu on the judo and takedown side. I've also done work with MMA and UFC fighters. And that experience of having to how do I apply judo in an outside space was really, really useful. I know I'm supposed to be talking more about my competitive career,
No,
but
it's all make it's fine. It's good.
yeah.
Don't worry.
Um, but really, when I look at it, my competitive career properly ended when I was like 23, 24. And
Mhm.
I wasn't, and I kept competing things, and, I showed up on, I was on the roster on and off for a while and that kind of thing. But really, I made the turn towards being more of an instructor and then eventually a coach in my mid 20s.
So it's pretty, you did stop competing like pretty young. I would say 23
Yeah.
is fairly young. But again,
Mhm.
you were also, pursuing you said your master's, doctorate degree. So there's also these
Mhm.
other things that take time
Mhm.
from elite level sport as well. So
Yeah.
I have to say like it's also okay. So what was
Mhm.
your top I guess staying in the competition side, then we'll go to the coaching side.
Mhm.
Your favorite moment, competing as an
Oh, the year I won junior nationals, because like I have been trying for so
Can I
long,
ask
and
you what year it is, just to
oh, that's so mean,
I
Hannah.
want to see if I was there.
Yeah, no, it's 2007.
Um, I was not a junior in 2007, so that I am older than you, I guess.
Yes. Yeah. No, the yeah, I missed I that was so I had tried so hard. Like I had that was the thing I wanted to do all through high school, and I would like come within like a penalty or come within the match or something like get really close. And you know I remember trying in different weight classes. I remember like just doing everything I could to figure it out. And um and I remember I had a really good performance at high school nationals that year. And I remember coming off of that feeling, oh, I think this might be my year. And that was, I remember like sitting down afterwards and like, oh, I finally did it. And I actually remember like a week later, like you cried
Yeah.
and you feel overwhelmed. I remember a week later being like, wow, that was a lot of work. Do I really want to do seniors? So
That's a whole other thing, right, from junior.
yeah, I'm like, oh geez.
Right,
And of course, like 3 days later, I'm like, yeah, I do. So I'm here anyway. So
Yeah.
I think that was a big one. The first time I medaled at the national level, it was a President's Cup. That was another big one. I had actually not had a good day earlier in the day. I fought some unknown guy and I went to OT, and I never saw the guy again. And then I lost a really tough overtime match in the semis, and I was pretty dead. But I remember coming out, and the in the first half of the match was not going well. It was one of those matches where like you're getting thrown every which way. You're like you're getting by this point I can cartwheel, so I'm cartwheeling out of things. But I remember finally catching the throw and then winning the match, and just like, oh, okay. It's like one of those things where it's like you start, kind of going back. Like I remember, not being able to run and turn running to a wall, and then Going from that to like, oh, I'm one of the best people in the country now. Like that was such like an overwhelming feeling. And I remember going off in the corner and kind of crying, but just being feeling very overwhelmed and
Wow.
um getting a big hug from Big Jim and a big hug. And Carrie Chandler was my mat side coach at the time, getting a big hug from her. And those were it's um these are things that's like, as I said, you spend a lot of time with your SSR doing any kind of disability, being told what you can't do. And then when you actually get to those moments where you get to do something that's objectively awesome,
Hmm.
it just it and let's be clear, anyone should feel that way about that kind of when you make those accomplishments. But
Yeah.
I feel like it had a lot of extra meaning. A lot of those accomplishments had a lot of extra meaning for me in my life because I had been told like I would never ride a bike, I would never do X, Y, and Z, and then here I am doing that.
Yeah, doing
So
judo, which is no easy sport. It's not an easy sport, you know. It's
mhm,
you have to have full body coordination, and there's so many different techniques, and there's just and judo is like you said something about like, in a box, but like you can't put judo in a box because like
mhm,
there's some players that do stand-up techniques. Some players just do, they're always doing the drop techniques or left or right
mhm.
sided or they go both sides or it's just like all over the place, honestly.
Well,
And so
that's what makes it like really intellectually interesting. It's like
yeah.
you look at all these different approaches. Like I got very part of why I got into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I was really into watching how Flavio Canto fought because I had figured out very early on that I didn't have to be super coordinated to be good on the ground.
Mhm. This too.
So
This is
yeah.
I also like okay, I gonna say I'm coordinated, but I also
Mhm,
found like I was very strong, but I also could w easily, it was like easier to win in Newaza than in Tachiwaza, like
mhm,
you didn't have to actually, like you said, be like extremely coordinated to win in Newaza.
mhm.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So yeah, I that's one of the things I love and I still love about judo is like I feel like the way you fight, particularly when you become a mature black belt or mature competitor, like the way you fight is such an insight into what your personality is.
Yeah,
And
that's true. That's very funny.
I feel like I think that's one of the reasons why people inside dojos often know each other so well or can become so close so quickly is because you can't really hide who you are while you're training seriously.
Hmm. Hmm.
um the person you are is going to come out like your inner self. And i think that's I think that's why you get such deep friendships in judo. I think that's why people end up understanding each other so well because it takes a lot of inherent trust to let you practice an armbar on me, because I need
Yeah.
to trust that you're not going to just take my arm out.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the special things about a sport like judo is that development of trust and how those friendships can form.
Yeah. Yeah, you said it like 100%. I agree with you, and I really like how you worded that because it's true. You have to trust your training partners, you have to
Mhm,
trust them, or else like you're not going to be able to do judo the next day. So I really
mhm,
understand that. So coaching,
mhm, mhm.
when did you, so you mentioned you kind of stopped around 22, 23, and then did you, just turn to coaching right away? You took a break from judo. When did you decide like coaching was really going to be for you?
So, there was kind of an understanding in my head that long term I was gonna like, particularly after I was like 16 or 17.
Hmm.
And I kind of so Jimmy started training me as an instructor and I was 16 years old. So I've been teaching judo for decades at this point. And actually teaching was a requirement at Jimmy's. You had to learn how to teach. You had to, and he actually talks about this about how much becoming a teacher actually helped his judo and really helped the peak of his judo career.
Hmm.
It's because it's one thing to do a move, it's another thing to understand how it works and then be able to, if you understand how it works, you can break it down defensively or understand how to use it offensively.
Yeah.
So I at 24, I remember I was at a training camp um in Canada and I got a bad concussion and I'd already been accepted into do my master's. So I that was the point where I was like, okay, I'm gonna take a break for a little bit. I
Hmm.
never stopped really training. I wasn't training at Jimmy's, but I was doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I was lifting, I was doing all the things with the intent of I was going to come back
Hmm.
after I finished my master's. Um, and during that time period, so I was still kind of actively in competitor mode for several years. I did come back. I was on the roster pretty quickly when I came back, but I then dealt with a few injuries. I had multiple surgeries on my shoulder.
Hmm.
I kind of couldn't manage to stay in the space as a competitor because I was dealing with too many injuries over time.
Hmm.
Um, but I kept teaching. I worked with some really cool instructors and athletes on the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and MMA side. I spent some time learning from like Marilla Santana, who those of you in the BJ world know who that is. I worked with Ryan Hall for a while, and more and more like it just was the thing was I wasn't really competing. I just started to naturally slide into this role of coaching.
Hmm.
And it wasn't, however, until like I would be brought in to, be an assistant coach or to do scouting. My first big scouting project was helping Kayla Harrison for the Rio Olympics. Kayla was actually my wedding party, and I was like, well, it'd be kind of cool to do something for each member of my wedding party. And I had been doing scouting. Actually, I was doing data analytics myself back in like 2009. It's funny. Because I now I use things like Athlete Analyzer. It does make my life a lot easier.
Yeah.
But I was running stuff on, okay, well, like I used to fight your teammate Tony San Gimino, and I actually using the video had detailed, who was attacking when, what was the efficacy. I was able to try to do all of that. So I then turned around and applied that, working with Kayla,
Hmm.
um, and gave that to Jimmy and worked with him. And Dr. Ferguson was a co-author with me on that one. But the stage was kind of set, kind of naturally for me to move into coaching. And then when COVID happened, at that point, when I got vaccinated, I was able to return to the mat from after COVID. Um, I really was excited to be back into judo and focus entirely on that. And I had some early success coaching, and it was kind of everything coming together. It's like it just felt very natural to me. Be like, okay, I'm gonna focus on high performance coaching, and I had a lot of early success at the national level, and we'll see from there.
Yeah, we'll see from there because, LA is knocking at the door, right? 2028.
Yeah.
So, um, you've done some scouting, so I'm interested to know like what qualities do you look for, like when you're scouting for athletes or, just like can we give us something that
Sure,
you
sure. So let's put this in like two areas. So bucket is like, okay, is this an athlete that we'll go first bucket is like, okay, what's an athlete with potential?
Mhm.
It's obviously very dependent on age. One of the things I do look for is when they're younger, I look for combination rates. So how many attacks are coming in combination and how many directions are the attacks coming.
Mhm.
So that's one. And then it's almost like a quick division problem of how few grips are they doing it from? Because what you're actually trying to see is like, can this person detect? So just talking about stand up, not talking about Newaza yet.
Yeah, yeah.
How good is this person at detecting, or at least trying to detect, where someone's leaning? Like, how good are they at detecting where someone's center of gravity actually is? And how much are they trying to link things together? Like, how much are they going to, and to be clear, like, this is almost like what would works well for me as a coach is I work well with players who naturally lean towards going into systems. And when they're younger, because hand feints aren't as common in juniors, you can detect that by saying, okay, well, I'm seeing Sasayo Soto, I'm seeing, Coach Yoji, I'm seeing combinations that are between 2 to 5 techniques deep, where they're attempting to hit along these different and directionals. So when I'm looking for potential athletes, that's a key thing. It's not just winning rate; it's how much do they understand judo? Because there's a lot of athletes running around who have a lot of physical capability, but do they actually understand? Do they understand the assignment? Is kind of what you're looking for when you're looking at those kinds of things.
Yeah, it's
Um,
interesting you say that because I think young athletes, I'm just going off of like when I was young, like
mhm,
I just kind of went off of feeling, like I
mhm.
just felt this and like I didn't even kind of know what I was doing, to be honest with you. I just kind of like felt it. So,
They
um,
usually don't.
yeah, like and then I remember people would come up to me like, "Oh, you did this move, and then then you did this, and then you that was very, very well done." And I was like, "I did that," So I think it's interesting like to have someone like you or like coaches like you that can like see these kind of things from the outside because sometimes the athletes have like no idea what they're doing. Like sometimes I look back in the video and I'm like, oh, okay, like I did that. I just felt it, like there was no one, maybe no one even taught me this. It was just like a instinctive movements that I do as a my own judoka. But
Oh yeah.
very funny things even when I was a junior, this always used to happen to me, and I was like, am I like
Mhm.
should I know these things? So I think it's interesting when a coach can tell you, oh, hey, this is like how you did this and can
Mhm.
break it down for you. And then maybe
Mhm.
you can work on it and get better at this. So
Yeah. So I look at that. I look at one important ratio I look at is who's first on the grip, like who is trying to create tempo as well as who's trying to be ahead in tempo, as well as time in strong positions. So what I mean by that is, you know, a lot of people are good at teaching how to throw, but most of, as you know, on the elite level, like your ability to throw is just one way to win a match. Like
yeah, this
it's at the end of the day, if you never get two hands on me, then I don't have to worry about how good your Uchimata is. So I also do look at things around when I'm scouting for younger players and looking at who might have potential. I am thinking a lot about what are they doing with their hands? Not do they know how to grip fight yet, because a lot of kids don't. But rather, do they intuitively understand, hey, I'm better off keeping that sleeve off of me, or and that leads to the last one, which is coachability. If you have someone who is super, super talented, but they won't listen, then like they're gonna hit their ceiling, and it might be a really high ceiling, but they're gonna hit a ceiling and they're not gonna get past that. Coachability is really important.
this is
Um,
true. I've seen this through my years. So I've seen so many
mhm.
talented athletes and they were not coachable. And also it has to do with like necessarily they didn't want to work for it, because it takes to get to a certain level that you want to be, you have to do the work too. So
Yeah,
it's talent that gets you far, So um
it's an interesting space. Now if I'm coaching offensively, that's when I get into like, okay, what gripping patterns is someone using? Like I start with gripping patterns because you can stop so much stuff by just starting with gripping patterns and identifying, starting off with what size this person, which side do they tend to throw, that kind of thing.
mhm.
But then really getting to the core of what openings are they using? Do they open with a cross grip? Are they trying to get to the body? If you can identify, effectively, if you can identify what their actual goals are and how they're getting to them, you can disrupt so much of it. And it was fun because Kayla posted one point on social media after she won. She actually posted about the scouting report. And she goes, credit to Chris and Roddy. It was like they were psychic because we had called out everything. You
Yeah.
actually can find the report online. But it's not just the hard part of scouting, though, is you can identify all the weak points of somebody's game, but then you also go, well, how can you access these? And there
Mhm.
are some players who you might be working with players, they don't actually don't have a way to access this. And the fight's in 2 days, so we're not gonna we could add some gripping, but we can't add some brand new. I'm not gonna add a Habarelli in 2 days.
No, no.
Um, but so identifying, and that's where the fun part of coaching, where the game happens as a coach, is you think about, okay, well, how do I get the information the athlete needs to them in a way that they can process and use? And how do we develop a game plan? I find that stuff really fun. I find the strategy of and the tactics of it to be really, really exciting.
Yeah, like speaking with you, like it's like a whole different you have a different like viewpoint of judo, like
Mhm.
it's very analytical and I think it's very interesting to talk about this, to hear this from you too.
Thank you.
No, looking ahead, so you actually just you were in Brazil, Rio de
Yeah.
Janeiro, like a few days ago, actually, um,
Mhm.
coaching some athletes. We're all looking ahead to LA 2028.
Mhm.
So what excites you most about coaching in this, Olympic cycle, which is going to be, the Olympics are going to be on our home turf. So
Mhm.
yeah,
Well,
what
I think the number one thing for me is like the potential of coaching someone to go to the Olympics and that they would be competing in the United States. Like that's
Mhm.
awesome. That's so cool. It's also interesting because it's like, when you and I were teenagers, it was a different Olympic qualification system. So it's kind of we don't know what that qualification ultimately look like right now, but like there are some elements of like, oh, it kind of reminds me when I was a teenager. But I think that you look at I think a lot of Americans overperform at the Olympics. We haven't had the best last two quads, but ultimately we often see Americans, really fight well, and the possibility of having an American in front of the home crowd, bringing home a medal is just really exciting and cool. But I also like it. I also kind of like that because it's in the US and there'll be a lot more focus on domestic judo. And I love international judo, let's be very clear, but I think there's a benefit to that in the long term.
Mhm.
When we look at kind of the last golden era of USA Judo, so like the London and Rio quads, there's a lot of people from our generation, and a lot of people in our generation really benefit from the fact that who was number one in the United States, that was a big deal. Oh, and there's a lot of competition around that. So as a result, really good junior players got opportunities to, you got to fight Valerie Gaute, Nick Del Pablo got to fight, Ryan
Right.
Reeser multiple teams.
Mhm.
You know, you had everyone had to fight each other and get each other better, and it created an awesome on ramp that made it so that when people because they got access to some of the really good B or A level players that when everyone else got older, they could all go and hang it really well. It was almost like a junior development pipeline that was built in.
Mhm.
So I'm excited about LA, but what I'm really excited for is what this means for 2032 and
Yeah.
2036 because
Yeah.
I think this is the best athlete development opportunity we could have asked for
Mhm.
because we can sit there and go, okay, we can get a lot of bodies on the mat. We can get a lot of bodies in tournaments. We can have people get quality matches in. And I think that is it's very exciting to me.
Yeah,
Because
you kind of
I want
already
to,
answered my next question, which was I was going to ask you like, how do you see the sport evolving in the next few years, both in terms of coaching and athlete development, like you said. So I don't know if you have more to add to this, but that
oh,
was
I do.
a
So I
question.
think, so I think one thing that's happening in the US is, so I think there's going to be, first off, coaching's changing. Coaching inherently, I mean, you've probably seen this with your husband and as well, but like the showing up to the dojo, showing how to do Chimata, and then like going about your day and doing some Ichikamis and doing Randori, like that's a model from 50 years ago.
Yes.
It's not what they do internationally. It's not what they were doing internationally even 15 years ago, but now it's really not what they're doing. And you have things like data analytics platforms, you have complex video review tools, you have there's some really awesome research that's been done in terms of skill acquisition. I do a lot of work combining deliberate practice skill acquisition models with what are now called ecological dynamic models, which not to get too academic.
Just went
Um,
over my head. So
you're fine.
okay.
So 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 I'll give you an example. So like this is like a hot topic in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu right now. Judo
Okay.
has actually but so what it is I think a lot of the way we try to teach things, I think we can chunk things down a bit more. Like I don't want to get too much of the secret sauce of stuff I do as a coach, but the way I teach, for example, gripping is I use a very goal-based approach. Like, yeah, they'll drill how to do a catch sequence or how to do different sequences or how to come out and get like that sumi lat position or something like that. But you can get a lot more mileage by if you take the entire task of walking out to throw somebody and you chunk it down into smaller tasks and work through each of those phases. And there's some really good academic research that's been done recently. There's a good book, Science of Judo, that was released. There was a book released last year, also published by Routledge, looking at how can you apply what's called a constraints-led approach to teaching judo. And the advantage of that is one, it can be overwhelming, particularly for juniors or also adult novices, by the way, um, to go through the entire process to throw somebody who's actively trying to throw them. But if you train them in a way where, like, okay, your first step is right on right, the first job is to go out and get the right sleeve. We're not doing anything else. We're not trying to throw each other. We're just trying to do that. Okay, the next step is I want the right sleeve. I want you to take the center space between their legs. I want you to get, and that would be like effectively what that's doing is teaching them. how to position themselves in space for something like Ochi or Shimada,
Mhm.
something down that line. And this is where I think my experience in growing up as autistic in the sport really helps me as a coach because I had to look at these all in systems and look at each step
Mhm.
and really get down into the weeds on this to understand it because I wasn't going to be able to walk out and just one-handed tie out somebody into next week.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's paid dividends for me as a coach because it's very easy now for me to be like, okay, I see where the step's missing. I'm going to create a drill or I'm going to create a micro randori situational randori situation
Mhm.
and we can address that. And it's allowed me like I have a small club. My club's less than 40 people, but we won a senior national team championship last year. I have a girl who she's 12. She has no training partners her size. She won junior nationals last year. And being able to pinpoint and work on these things makes a big difference. And I think that's where, and kind of come back to an even earlier question you had, if you take people who are different and you empower them, eventually they often can, the thing that makes them different, they can turn into a superpower.
Yeah.
They can use that to bring a new perspective, to create new opportunities that may not have been there. Like, okay, didn't make an Olympic team and that sucks, but like this tools I developed that got me as far as I did and allowed me to help friends of mine go further and has now allowed me to help my students go really far.
Yeah.
So that's also a key thing I'll mention to instructors. When you have a student walk in the door who seems like they're going to take more effort, who seems like they're going to, you know, oh, this person's not inherently athletic. I'm not going to put my time into them or something down that line. Don't do that. Like, give everyone the time of day. And if you're one instructor, and you got 50 students, I understand. I've been there. It's tough, but go put in the effort to make sure everyone gets an opportunity to succeed and feel empowered because one, not everyone's going to be an Olympian anyways. And two, you know, you don't know what that person's journey is going to be like.
Mhm.
If my sensei had said, well, that kid can't turn while running and just put a hole in my wall and I'm not going to put a lot of time into them, um, that would have been pretty sad. And, I've gotten to have a good impact now on people. And that's because my sensei put that energy into me.
Mhm.
And I think so much of our time as instructors and coaches and senseis in judo, we have to remember that our job is to empower and bring people up. And because if you do that, if you give them that energy, you don't know where they'll take it. You don't know where they're going to end up. And I think that's really important.
This is 100% important. And I spoke with like one of my first coaches, well, my first coach in judo, Jim Herbeck, a
Mm-hmm.
few months ago. And I thanked him for giving me the confidence to like keep going in judo because there was, yeah, I didn't have like 100% support from family and things like this. And he believed in me and he gave me like what I needed, like
Mm-hmm.
not, it wasn't judo related. It was like, mentally, he spoke with me, he talked to me and made me feel like I can do it. And I
Mm-hmm.
really think like when I had the really, really hard moments, I was like, yeah, someone believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And it
Mm-hmm.
kept me going. And this is like really, really important for coaches to remember. Like it's not about making Olympic champions, it's about
Mm-hmm.
like creating, you know, making not making the athlete, it's like affecting the person, and it really makes a big difference in their life. So, coaching, you can make a huge difference in someone's life just by coaching, and it doesn't have to be the
Mm-hmm.
sport related. It's off the mat. Like you're a
Mm-hmm.
perfect example of this too. So you're
Thank you,
you're
Han.
involved in judo, but like judo has helped you evolve into, you're a doctor, you are a scholar, like you have so many different things to offer. You're a coach now, like okay, you're still involved with judo because you're a judo
Mm-hmm.
fanatic, like me. I'm still
Mm-hmm.
involved in judo after retiring. I think I always will
Mm-hmm.
be involved in judo.
Mm-hmm.
So then before we finish here, where can people follow your work or connect with you if they're interested in speaking?
Sure. You can find me. You can find the Instagram for my judo club, High Noon Judo. We put a lot of material out there. I show up on podcasts every once in a while. So that's a good space to find me. Feel free to reach out if you. I do clinics. I'm actually doing one April 27th. I, you know, I'm fairly accessible. But I would reach out over to High Noon Judo's Instagram if you have any further questions or any interest.
And what's next for you? So coaching wise, are you going to, there's youth nationals next week. We have
Oh my God, I have a busy
nationals
month.
coming
I
up.
have a
Where,
busy
where,
month.
where are you going? What's
Oh
next?
my God. I have a really busy month. So I got youth nationals next week. And then presuming that goes well, I'm bringing players to Panama, the cadet and junior open there. I've got junior Pan Ams. I have people getting ready for senior nationals, and kind of based on how the next 2 months goes, depends on where else I'm going. And that in terms of, hey, are we doing cadet worlds? Are we doing additional content opens? Most of the athletes I'm working with right now, I'm working with like Chloe Williams and a few other people who are up and coming. They In this phase, I'm very focused on what are the opportunities to get better as opposed to like what tournaments are we hitting.
Yeah, like
So
results and things like this. Yeah. So looking for like
yeah,
experience and getting it improving,
yeah,
but using competitions also to improve. Yeah. So
yes, yes. So I'm organizing some training opportunities that, watch High Noon Judo's Instagram because we're going to be announcing some really cool things. But I put in a lot of effort to put on camps and training opportunities that um, are highly productive for my athletes. Also, anyone else who wants to come by and show up.
awesome.
I do want to plug all of my judo work I do through a nonprofit called Martial Arts for Social Transformation, Equity, and Rights Masters. Um, we put in a lot of effort, not just on the elite side, but we also work to create training scholarships for families that otherwise wouldn't be able to access judo or access Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. We work very closely with several partners. And if you have any interest, please go check that out at martial arts for social good .org.
Awesome. Chris, this has been really a credible conversation. So cool to connect. Thank you for sharing your insights, your journey. It's really inspiring and definitely interesting to hear like your side of how you view judo. I really think it's interesting. So
Thank you
yeah,
so much, Hannah.
thanks for being here. It's been a nice conversation.
Thank you.